Right, we are live. Welcome back to Creator's Corner, everyone. I am Jarrett Ditch. We are missing Jeannie, but we are excited. I'm excited, actually, to have Daniel uh, Giamario with us, astrologer, and one of the original UNITE creators, back with us on Creator's Corner. I didn't get a chance to meet Daniel in the last Creator's Corner, so I'm really excited to have the opportunity to meet him now. And Daniel is the founder of the Turning of the Ages Mystery School, which is located in Arizona. Is that correct?
Well, there is we're kind of a combination of being nomadic and virtual. We don't actually have like a campus or anything like that, but the main places we operate out of are usually Arizona when we're not doing international or traveling. You know, we do groups in different parts of the world.
Okay, great. You have to let me know about all the different parts of the world. Let us know that in a little bit. But I'd like to just introduce a couple little things, more things about Daniel. This is his second time on Creator's Corner. And this time, Daniel will focus on a specific and fascinating aspect of the Turning of the Ages Mystery School Astrology, which is new to me and I'm just learning about now. And someone who's fascinated with the stars and someone who really respects those who have the ability and the knowledge and reading the stars. I'm really excited to get here. And Daniel, the inner sacred marriage process, also known as the full spectrum of archetypal sacred masculine, sacred feminine expressions. So I love that concept too, and I'm excited to hear more about that as well. And you might even use live chart data, which apparently we may dive into my chart a little bit. So excited to hear a little bit about that as well. And yeah, I'm just excited to have you back, brother, and looking forward to hearing what's going on with you and a little bit more about what's going on in the stars.
So, shall I just give a little background on the how the school happened and what my own journey has been? I'll just recapitulate a little bit of that. Actually have been in the astrological world since 1969. I was fortunate enough to be in university in the late 60s, and you know that was the great time when. For about 3 or 4 years, we kicked the military off campus. We kicked the corporations off campus. It was sororities and fraternities were kicked off. I mean, it was actually one of the last bastions of a more, in the better sense of the word, what used to be the meaning of the word, a liberal arts education. You know, and it was that time period when there was a cultural revolution happening in a lot of ways. You know. There was the women's movement, you know, there's gay liberation, you know, and there was different things, the opposition to the Vietnam War. And this was also happening in the astrological world. And so therefore there was a pushback against a more patriarchal, Hellenistic overlay on to astrology. And so a lot of us were then working with a different form of astrology, which was not deterministic, that it was more associated with using astrology to help a person tune into what their life purpose was. You know, basically the evolution of the soul was associated with it. But then by 1981, though, I'd become very much interested in earth sky kind of shamanic approach. You know, I had a vision quest experience at Mount Shasta in 1981. And then from that time on, I created a series of different organizations that had as its intention to train people who do astrology in knowing the sky, knowing the land, knowing basically having it be more experiential rather than some kind of left brain kind of thing. And it was in the 1980s that I actually coined the expression, the turning of the ages. And my first organization was called the Harbingers of the Turning of the Ages. And then for about 20 years, it was called the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School. And then a couple of years ago, the third wave was created, which is the Turning of the Ages Mystery School. And we have, you know, a curriculum. We train people to be the type of astrology that is different than, as I mentioned, sun sign astrology or more mainstream deterministic astrology. And we do courses around the world. In fact, I'll be taking a group of people to the outer Hebrides, the island of Lewis, to do a workshop gathering at the Callanish Stone Circle, which is where there's something happening this year and next year that only happens every 19 years, which is called When the Moon Walks on the Land. It's at a time frame when there's, astrologers will know the expression, when there's an out of bounds moon. And this is a 6,000-year-old site that was completely oriented toward honoring the sacred feminine and the moon cycles. And they built about 20 different stone circles and to zero in on this phenomena. So that's just one example. We just recently had a gathering in Ohio. The ancient
during the eclipse,
pre-colonial, yeah, for the eclipse, right in the area of Ohio where there's the pre-colonial mound culture, which is just, there's thousands of them in that particular area, including a master site that we were able to watch the eclipse from. We had quite a magical experience on that. So that's just an example of what our school does. But yeah, this is my 55th year of doing this, although I was only full-time since 1987. But I was doing charts back as far back as 1969, 70, when back in the day when I would hand calculate charts.
So that's what I envision. I mean, when I'm hearing you speak, I'm envisioning you hand calculating the charts.
Up until 78, 79, that's what I did.
Yeah, that's how I envision it. I mean, I really appreciated, when I like a lot of Viking lore and history, and I really appreciate their ability to read the stars and as a map and directions. And so to take it a step further as you do, and to not only read it in a practical way, but to also read it in the style of your life's journey, is another practice, is another level, which I understand, why the school was created, because you would need to be taught how to read that. And yeah, it appears you've been doing it for a very long time.
Well, you might be curious about then why is it called the Turning of the Ages? As far back as, the first appearance of this came in 1969, but then all through the 80s, and the research that I've been engaged in since then is this understanding that there's a convergence of different timelines. And whether you look at what is called the precessional cycle, a 26,000-year cycle, new research in India, what they call the Yuga cycles, even integrating certain things that have nothing to do much with astrology, like the fourth turning material, also the fifth or sixth sun in the Toltec and Aztec world, which is the time period we're in now. And we date it actually very precisely in our school as between 1962 and 2034, which is one of the great turnings, where there's a convergence of different things, where at the end of Kali Yuga, where basically what we find ourselves in is at a time period of the greatest overwhelming descent into materialism. Where scientism and the current like trust the science kind of thing has eliminated spirit and soul. Everything is basically can translated down into it's your DNA or it's your genes, and we can fix that and we can change that. So our school is very much a standing for authentic human beings, with soul and spirit and connection to divinity, and not AI. So the one reason why we chose to go with your platform was due to the fact that I wanted to be able to speak openly about these things. And so I've written a bunch of stuff about technosis and about the AI technocracy and all the rest of that. And some of my broadcasts have been on that issue. Actually, the show that somehow got disappeared out there somewhere, with the last one we did, was a chart analysis of the chain of connections between Kissinger, Klaus Schwab, and the successor to Klaus Schwab, and how they all met in 1971 and created the WEF. That was what the show was about.
Oh,
And
wow.
so my shows
Interesting.
basically have to do with looking at those kind of things. We've done analysis of the presidential candidates, and actually one of the first shows was related to what our topic is today, which was a whole show on sex and gender. Because there's we also, of course, have a very clear opinion at this point, which is, I call it the hijack of the word gender. And an attempt to eliminate the biological basis of XX humans and XY humans, and where basically it's a whole design in order to take people into transhumanism and the elimination of sexuality itself. So these are topics that we cover, but it's more like a what we'll talk about today. I'm assuming, although we can go any direction you'd like.
I love the direction that you've chosen for today. I think it's a great direction, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about it, which is the inner sacred marriage process, also known as the full spectrum of archetypal sacred masculine, sacred feminine expression. So we're looking at the full spectrum of archetypal, which I love archetypes. So I'm looking forward to hearing how that connects, and then how you tie it into the sacred marriage process as well.
Yes. Well, we have in our training program, we have 5 courses that we offer for people who want to be certified in these techniques. And the third one is on relationship and the sacred marriage process. And basically the whole purpose of that training is to describe the full spectrum. I mean, there's so many authentic expressions of men and women. And in our even back in the early 70s, the objective of the school of astrology I was in was to expose the fact that the prevalent culture had views about what a man was supposed to be or what a woman was supposed to be, and we were trying to expand that, because the original meaning of the word gender was based on what the culture said men and women are supposed to be, and even before that, gender was more about grammar. And now that sometimes sex and gender are used in kind of sloppy ways. So now that people don't even say sex anymore, they just say gender. Well, our own view would be that in the horoscope, it's not the sun sign. I mean, in one of the previous broadcasts, I talked about how the sun sign material has really made astrology quite superficial. But it's actually the Venus and Mars positions most, on the front lines of our interpretation, that can show which archetype of the masculine or feminine a person has come in to investigate. Now this brings up an important distinction between this type of astrology and a lot of others, I won't say all, which is that this is an astrology that's based on intent. So if I said somebody had Mars in Scorpio, that doesn't mean everybody with Mars in Scorpio is like that. But rather, it's like a set of instructions. It's an investigatory project, I guess we could say. So in this way of perceiving the archetypal full spectrum, we would say, based on a man's Mars position or a woman's Venus position, it's describing what is the authentic expression, what archetypal expression that person came into the life to investigate. And there are different ones. If I can give you an example, you're probably familiar with the word yin and yang. So we could say that yang is like really actional. It's, it might be considered to be more considered archetypally masculine, and yin is more, like receptive or not actional, receiving, giving, things like that. and it would be considered to be more archetypally feminine. Well, there's a lot of men who are more oriented toward yin, and there are a lot of women, particularly a lot in the Western world today, that are more oriented toward yang. So just because someone is a biological female, for example, doesn't mean she's a mother or a provider of nourishment. Or just because someone is born biologically male doesn't mean they're supposed to be a warrior or a father. I mean, so there's many men that they're lovers, or they're tricksters, or they're providers of nourishment. These are like the different authentic expressions for the full spectrum of human beings. So when we explore gender and sex, we always start with the fact that we're all human first, and then with the exception about maybe 0.5% of people who are born, you're either XX fully or XY fully, so then there is the biological differences. But then from that point on, you can choose to inhabit the different authentic expressions, not necessarily what the culture said a man or a woman is supposed to be, or not what your parents wanted you to be, or whatever, or your peers wanted you to be. But we're really exploring the freedom that a person can have to really be their archetype, to be the one they intended to come in to be.
Yeah, I think that's a journey that we're all a part of. We see it in a mass scale. We see it also, I think, within ourselves, in a sense, looking, at what archetype we may represent to others, as well as, what feels right to ourselves.
So that in this exploration, and it's real interesting when we do the course on the inner sacred marriage process. There's so much interest these days in relationships, trying to make our relationships work. But the material that we're sharing here has a dual purpose. On one hand, yes, it will make relationships better. You'll have a better sense of why you project certain things on other people, why they project certain things on you. But on a spiritual level, there's a deeper reason to know this material, which is to create inner wholeness. So that while what's in more recent times, since there's a guy that in 1970 coined an expression called the psychosocial moratorium, which basically means that there's a time period from puberty to when a culture would consider a person to be adult, where you have a chance to explore, as opposed to many other times in history where you're at 14, a girl's 14, she get pregnant, so they get married off, or they get pregnant. Or a guy in many time periods in history, when he's 14 or 15, he's a man now, when in fact now there's a delay into what would be considered to be adulthood. So this is a great time to explore, what are we really interested in? What maybe our life purpose, or our sexual identity, or what it is we get off on, and what we're turned on to is very different than what our culture said that we were supposed to be doing. And so there's that exploration time, and then at a certain point, that projection is brought in, and then it turns out that the soul has both aspects. So the soul the sacred marriage is the union of Venus and Mars, I guess you could say. Where what is looked for out there is integrated internally, and then actually at that point you're whole, and then that makes your relationships better. Or actually, some people, once they're whole, once they have that inner sacred marriage, they might decide, it's not that common, but they might decide that I'm just fine on my own. I don't need to have any form of a personal relationship.
Okay, yeah, it took me a second. Now I understand that you're putting the sacred marriage process not only, like for instance, with a spouse, but it starts within you. The sacred marriage
Yeah.
process is the process
Well,
within you.
it's funny. It usually starts with what our experience is in our relationships. You know,
So it's the projection, like you were
yeah,
saying, it's the what's projected on us, and then what we face or what we feel internally that doesn't match what's being projected on us.
right.
And it's the marriage of those two things.
Yes, yes. And this imagery on the chart, if you look at it this way, will give you the archetypal clues on how to do it.
Okay.
And so what I've noticed over the years is that I'll give you an example. I was once doing a workshop on this topic, and there were maybe 100 people in the audience. And so I asked the question to the audience, well, how many of you out there have had challenges, difficulties, upsets, violations, unfairness in your relationship life? About, maybe 90% of the hands go up. Now some hands did not go up, and I saw we're going to put all of those of you who did not raise your hand over on one side of the room, and the 90% on the other side of the room.
I mean,
and then
you said challenges, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Or all varieties of different challenges,
Sure. Yeah.
rejection, violation, unfairness,
Yeah. Feelings
hidden
of
material,
rejection. Yeah. All the things. I understand.
deficiency, right? And so what I said to the 10%, I said to the whole group, I said, those of you over in the 10% group do not know anything better or are not better at relationship than those that are over on the 90%. You just had a different hand dealt you, so you maybe automatically found the right person, or your challenges in life were something different. I mean, in a lot of ways,
or your perspective of what a challenge might be, or a
right.
difficulty, or an uncertainty in a relationship might be different as well.
So the point I'm making really is that the challenges that we encounter are the experiences that will eventually take us to the inner work, the inner sacred marriage work. And the more we do that, the more our external relationships are better, or we get to a place where we're not unhappy because I know that I was the absolute best person that individual could have ever been with, but they rejected me. So essentially you're not taking it personally. You're seeing it as a process of gaining inner wholeness.
Yes, I can totally see it. I understand what you mean by gaining inner wholeness, and the marriage between the masculine and the feminine, and how that brings you to a more whole place, where in turn, like you said before, it may feel like you might not need that feminine or masculine energy
Right.
represented in a different human, or a person, because you feel so whole and complete within yourself.
Yeah,
I
one thing I
understand.
should mention, because I'm sure there are people thinking about this right at the moment, that this is really based on archetypes, not biological sexuality. So in other words, there could be two women in same-sex relationship, or two men in same-sex relationship, and they still are projecting the archetype. So it really kind of doesn't matter. I mean, if a person chooses to work out their relationship life with someone of the same sex, well, then they're still having to deal with the same archetypal projection. So which then gives you an example of why the full spectrum of possibilities are out there, regardless of one's sexual orientation. There are plenty of people in same-sex relationships that are pair bonders. In fact, a lot more. I mean, as many as there are among heterosexual people. While there are people who, let's say, who do not pair bond, that are polyamorous, or that are bisexual or whatever. And the same spectrum is there. Whatever your sexual orientation is.
Yeah, right. No, it makes sense. Regardless of what your sexual orientation is, there's still the inner masculine and feminine.
Yes.
It's that projection, and it's kind of it came from your story. It's kind of who's created who you are to this point.
Yeah, there's a certain innate thing, and I'll add another part to this. And I think I discussed it in the previous conversation, that we also look at the moon position in a very different way than a lot of mainstream astrology does. So we look at the moon position as a person's lineage. So there's a way of looking at the chart to get a sense of what you came in with. There's an assumption we're making, and you know what, over maybe doing 20, 30,000 sessions at this point, I've never found any person who pushed back when I said this. Not one. And it's that when you're born, you're not a blank slate. When you're born, there's going to be certain attitudes, habits, addictions, expectations, and a skill set that you come into the life with that are there as essential qualities prior to whatever family you're born into, whatever culture you're born into, or whatever time in history.
Is it those things that you just feel like are part of who you are, in the sense, like whether it's a skill or something you just picked up quickly, or just something you just get quickly?
Well,
you just understand it. It didn't take you long to understand it, whether it's a skill, a lifelong lesson that, some people might take ages to learn, but it just came to you quickly. It feels like it's a part of you and you're almost built for that.
Well, even deeper than that, it's more like instinctual. There's
Instinctual.
there are certain approaches. Like some people are just naturally givers, while other individuals don't even understand that concept. I mean, we've actually divided the whole spectrum of human beings into three categories. This is not the archetypes of masculine and feminine, but it's a way of looking at the signs themselves, which we call mystery schools of life. Okay, 12 mystery schools of life. And 1/3 of them are mainly just about self-exploration, self-valuing. 1/3 of them are in service to spirit. And then about 1/3 of them are what we call householder or culture bearers. The ones that for 300,000 years, they're the ones that have formed the long-lasting relationships, have held it together, have been the nurturers, have been the protectors of a clan or a culture. The ones that have create the continuity, from one generation to the next. And so there's different categories of even what the dharma of an individual is. What their duties or responsibilities are, but a lot of that is associated with discovering what your life purpose is.
Yeah. No, I completely understand. I'm interested in, Daniel, you mentioned, I know you took my birth date earlier. Is this when when you're talking about doing a live data, is this what you were referencing?
Well, what I can tell just without even running the exact chart. I mean, I have to run the exact chart in order to know the rising sign. I mean, the rising sign is really important because it's one of the most important clues for creating a storyline for current life purpose. But what I can tell really just by the day and year are some very important things. And when I'm looking at your chart, I always start by looking at the moon position. And your moon is in Capricorn. Now, full disclosure, I'm also Capricorn moon. Okay, so that's kind of like saying we're both from the same tribe. Or we both have previously, the language I use on it is, Capricorn moon. Well, I have previously graduated from the University of Capricorn, or I
come in.
I come from the Capricorn tribe. So what does that mean? Well, for lifetimes, if we use a mythic imagery there, it's the Capricorns on the wheel of life who had the job of holding it all together in a responsible way for others. They were the ones that were the elders, the ones that had the knowledge, practical knowledge, the ones that did the research, I'm always remembering this thing that apparently was said once by Sir Isaac Newton. You know, he was being criticized for being an astrologer, and his response was very curtly saying, "I have studied this subject, sir. You have not." So there's a certain sense of holding it together, responsibility, wanting to be respected for what you know, and it's actually most Capricorn moons come into the life elders. You know, I mean, they often don't get to you know, be innocent children. You know, it's like they know a lot when they come in. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know enough about your story, but often it's the Capricorn moons that are the oldest. You know, the oldest son or the oldest daughter, or the one who is required to know, to hold it together for others. But that's not the objective in the current life. I mean, that's what you come in with. So now the other two things I can tell. One is the Mars position, which would have to do with what version of the masculine that you came in to investigate. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. It's Mars and Leo. And then the Venus position, which happens to be the exact same sign as your sun sign. So, you know, I'm a Libra, you know, and your sun is in Libra, but your Venus position is also in Libra. So that is the projected image. Now, what that would say, let's unpack this. Mars in Leo is the set of instructions for what version of the masculine you came in to be. Now, our definition of Leo is very simple. Having the courage to be creator for its own sake, being able to make it up any way you want. There's a very, it's actually, I can add some other stuff to it. It's like being the star of the show, the performer, the charismatic vision carrier, the individual who has the joy of their own performance, if I could put it that way. And when it's done really well, it's not egoic. You know, I mean, there's only the shadow side of Leo, which would be, I'm God and you're not. But rather, it's more like, because you would feel so confident and so much joy in your own self-expression and creativity, that it's giving other people permission to be everything they can be. So it's an inspiring kind of thing. Now, another way I could put this regarding the contrast between the Capricorn moon and Mars and Leo. So Capricorn moon is very serious. You know, it's a responsible, serious kind of thing. And as I mentioned, it's sort of like coming into the life as an elder. But Leo is more like a healthy 2-year-old. Now, what could be a healthy 2-year-old? Well, loving, supportive, non-smothering parents, but parents that are also, you know, not critical, judgmental. So the 2-year-old's out dancing, playing, pretending, making it up any way they want, and they're not looking around to see if what they're doing corresponds to some more perfect creation. So it's the joy of life rather than the responsibility of life, I guess you could say, is the contrast between those two. But when we put in the relationship material, Venus in Libra. Now, this is a projection onto the Libran archetype. Now, this requires a little bit of unpacking, because from a normal cultural perspective, if a woman projects Libra, if a man projects Libra, then they actually are, what they're looking for is someone who's a great partner. You know, someone who would, without coercion, choose you to be their number one priority, or you would want to be with someone who's committed and committed to being your partner, and who's willing to work on the relationship, willing to do the work of relational work, I guess you could say. Now, from a purely cultural perspective, I'm certainly not projecting this onto you at all. Then we would find out there in the ordinary world, it's the guy that's just looking for a wife. You know, in the old imagery of the wife, in a role orientation. But what it is that I see when I see a chart like yours is the goal really, and I have no idea what your relationship history is, but the goal is to be in a circumstance which we call conscious equal partnership, non-hierarchical conscious equal partnership, beyond the roles of, say, Christian marriage or something like that. Now, you also have the Venus position in Libra, almost exactly the same degree as your sun sign. Now, this is an extremely specific position in the Venus cycle. It's on the other side of the sun. It's the time period when Venus would have been invisible. So therefore, what this tells us is that it's almost like, well, we call it an underworld position, meaning that the relationship life, because of the desire for what I'm describing, you will have sometimes encounter circumstances that are chaotic or beyond your control, or where the individual turns out to have maybe a secret history, or they put themselves in they say, yes, of course, I'm all in with you, but then it turns out that it wasn't true, and then you were trying to prove to yourself to them, when in fact the goal is to actually, and this is the key to the sacred marriage work, is regardless of what it is that has or is happening in your personal relationship life, the person who you most need to have as your favorite person to be in relationship with is yourself. However, but at the same time, this is not the chart of a renunciate. This is not the chart of a person who came into the life in order to just be alone. I mean, the goal is to have ultimately non-hierarchical conscious equal partnership.
Yeah, I mean, I hope you noticed I didn't back away from anything that you just said. That was yeah, almost to a T, that chart, from relating to the creative, coming forward as the performer, in the sense you related it to that sense, and if you're referring to that's the time that we're in now, is that I'm in that time now, then it's amazingly enough that I just opened up my own dance school. And after being a professional dancer for my entire life, traveling the world, working all over the place, shows everywhere, all kinds of things. And I just opened up my own school. And well, it feels like this opportunity to share what I have in my knowledge and education, and give it away as much as I can. I feel like that's what I want to do.
Well, what I would suggest is, there's two things that come forth here that I have to tell you about. The first thing, though, is that at this stage of your life, given that I've described you as being this person who has researched the subject, and you have a certain mastery, you are respected for what you've already done up to this point in your life, is that you'll be natural at being a teacher of what you know, okay? But I want to suggest that you don't go entirely in that direction, but to make sure your own performance and your own joy of the creative process is equal to being the one who has to manage the whole thing.
Thank you for saying that.
But now this is another factor. This is something that's so easy to tell when I just do this sort of live thing. All right. And this is a separate subject, but it's our second course in our school is about cycles and seasons. And I always start by looking and seeing where a person is on the timeline of their life. And there are certain distinct points. I mean, I like to think of the archetypal lifespan as being about 88 to 90 years, 3 Saturn returns. But that could actually be divided into 4 seasons: spring, summer, fall, winter. And it turns out the cycle you're in right now is the junction point, the gear change point from summer into fall. There is a major Saturn cycle, which is like the higher octave of the puberty time. So there would have been the same cycle happening at age 14, and now it's happening again. And it is, without question, these next 9 months, I cannot imagine a more perfect time to be rolling up your sleeves, diving in, and creating the next phase of your life. I mean, for some people, it's when they discover, well, what I've been doing, I hate it. I hate doing it. I want to do something different. But as far as what you've shared with me, it's like a graduation to what the next thing you would want to do with what you've been engaged with in your life. Obviously, make your own school, but as long as you're also still a performer, and so these next 9 months are like giving birth to that. There's it's almost a precision, that as we're speaking right now, is where Saturn has reached the beginning of about a 9-month time period, which is like giving birth to it. It's like a gestation of the building of what it is you're going to do next. Now, other people, let's say, they might face this time, be at this time period. What if a couple had a early marriage? They got married early. They had started having kids at 20 years old, 19, 20, 21 year old. Then this would be an empty nest time. And so that's generally when the two people in a relationship will say, well, why are we together now? Did we get married just to have kids? And is there something, for us now after they're out on their own? That's one possibility that sometimes happens in this junction point. Also, if I'm talking to women right now, it's usually this point where the individual is not going to be having any more kids. So it's kind of like there's a designated time period from about one Saturn opposition to the one happening at age 44 or 45, which is the ending of that time period. I guess in a general average sense is perimenopause time, and then the full-on menopause is the next Saturn cycle at age 51 to 52. So it's like resume changes happen, is what I'm trying to get at. It also could be for me, I did not have my first marriage until this cycle. I mean, at 44.
Yeah, it feels like quantum moments.
Yeah.
Like
it's really birthing. It's like giving birth to the next phase of your life.
Yeah. I can validate that 100%. Wow, Daniel, I think you're incredible, and what a mentor and a teacher and an educator and astrologer. What a unique gift you have as well, to be able to look at charts and to help people, even myself, to just see the journey that not only have we been on, but the journey, what we came with, as well as what's projected on us, and and what we feel, instinctually as well, and able to put that all together in a map, and that we can see, that I can see, and it helps to answer questions and helps to validate direction, and feels inspiring. So I think if anyone has the opportunity to connect with Daniel and with the school as well, I think that would be an excellent idea. And yeah, Daniel, I'd love to hear anything else you'd like to say and share.
Sure. Well, just to carry on with what you just said there, since we were talking about the turning of the ages and talking about the importance of the time we're in now, the convergence of all these different timelines. And if I was to start talking again about the events happening in the world, and what are the various scenarios that could unfold, looking at what the powers that shouldn't be are up to and things like that, then the questions that people will have are, what do we do about this? What can we do? And in our school, we think the bottom line is to be able to, as quickly as possible, to get a sense of what your life purpose is. Because if you know what your life purpose is, it really doesn't entirely matter what happens on the outside. I'm reminded of that thing that is allegedly said by I think it was Saint Francis of Assisi, where he's out hoeing his garden, and someone walks up to him and says, "What would you do if you were to be shot at sunset?" And his response was, "I would keep hoeing my garden." Another example I could give is that I have a client who, brilliant man, completely leading edge intellectual researcher. He has Mars in Cancer. Now, there's a Mars in Cancer for a man is the intention to be a provider of nourishment, in most cases to a child. The guy is 47, and it turns out he has a partner where they're having their first child. All right. Now, there's a lot of folks out there, when they look at the way the world is right now, they say, why would we want to bring children into this? And that's a valid approach a lot of people might have. But for him, or for a person who has that dharma, that's what you're here to do. So even if the whole thing is annihilated in a year, you still do that. I mean, it's like if you're a gardener and you're being told that there will be no rain for the next 10 years, you're still a gardener. So you continue with what your dharma or your life purpose themes are. So it's the outcome is less important than being in alignment with what you were born to do. We talked about Dane Rajar, who Sergey is familiar with. He has a really incredible quote, Rajar. He said that if a person does not fulfill their dharma, there is a hole in the universe left where that person was intended to be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it is true. I mean, we're trying to focus on helping people wake up and to get what their life purpose is.
Absolutely. I think that's what we all want to support in each other as humanity, is the discovery of your gift, of your purpose, of what you're meant to share, because we all have something. And so it's just really a matter of tapping into that, I think, right?
Yeah. Well, and also, a lot of times we need some clues,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sometimes it just requires a certain kind of education. Like, I'm a type of astrologer that I don't like being in a position where I'm telling people what to do. I'm very fortunate that in our school and among my clientele, which is why I was gravitated to your platform, really, is that the great majority of the individuals that are pretty awake, or really wanting to be awake as quickly as possible. So most of the time, my job is kind of easy, because I'll just be second opinion to their intuition, or I'll say, yes, that's it, or this is the time period to not take action and go forward, right? Or this is the time period to just lay back, or this is the time period where not to take anything personally. But like in your case, it's so clear cut. It's like this is the time to take action, move forward, and give birth to the next phase of your life.
I hear you loud and clear, Daniel.
Now, if I have time to say one other thing, it's the other approach. In answer to that question, what do we do? What can we do about this? Well, what we try to share with people is that, and this is coming from core shamanism, that there's three worlds. There's the upper world, the middle world, and the lower world. Now, this is we're doing this the way the ancients would have seen it. So the upper world is the sky, the stars, the celestial, the spiritual. The middle world is just the reality, what we're going through. 3D, and then the underworld is chaotic, overwhelming. The powerful waves below the surface of the ocean, the lava tubes running, the kundalini that comes up from the center of the earth, which is more powerful than any consciousness. So there's so that basically chaos. Out of chaos comes the world, is the way the ancient Greeks put it. So all three worlds are happening at the same time. If I could give a practical example, sure. No matter what happens on this planet, we could say from the celestial perspective, all is well. Great mystery has it under control. The world is unfolding as it should. That's true from one perspective. The underworld perspective is saying that actually this could all wink out instantly. There could be annihilation at any moment. So therefore, there really is no middle world security. That we need to have our security with God, with great spirit, with great mystery, with our higher spiritual essence. But then in the middle world, got to pay attention to that. What's the reality here? Let's look at it right in the face. Let's call out where lack of love is. Let's call out where manipulation is. Let's call out where lying is. And like that. To not turn away from it. But to confront it. I'm Mars and Scorpio. So it meaning basically that. I'm responding passionately to what I'm experiencing.
Yeah. You've been the whole time, which is why we appreciate your voice. It's and the passion that you have for what you believe in and what you do. Absolutely.
So we try to say, look at all three worlds at the same time. Otherwise, if you go too much into the celestial world, then it becomes like it's all love and light, and it's called spiritual bypass. It's called light polarization. It ends up becoming what my colleague Nuraya calls the New Cage movement.
I definitely see the I guess as a Libra. I mean, regardless as a Libra, I'm speaking that way now. But I see the balance between the three worlds and how it's important to see and feel all three. All three worlds. You said.
Well, don't forget, from what I'm just shared with you here, that notwithstanding whatever I might have sounded negative about regarding sun sign astrology, is that your inner other. The other part of your soul is Libra. So you're not only born in the month of Libra, but your your sacred marriage ingredient is also Libra. So if I could synthesize what you just said, beyond the dharma of relationship, you're balancing what I described as Leo, the performer, the joy of creation, with the Capricorn side, which is, hey, I'm the expert here. I know how to teach this, and I have a long history of doing it, and my resume shows that I'm in a position that I know what I'm doing. Those two things, one is a 2-year-old and one is an old man.
Yeah, I can feel that. Well said. Well said. Daniel, thank you so much for being here on Creator's Corner. Again, it's a pleasure to have met you on this level and to speak with you. And thank you for sharing your reading with me as well, and relating it not only to me, but to also anyone who might watch as well. I feel like might get, will get value from this. This is an amazing opportunity, and hopefully an opportunity to connect with you on another level, whether it's going to your website, which is beautiful, at turningoftheages.com, to learn more about you. You can even donate as well and look at the offerings and the events, the calendar about where you're going to be and what events are happening. So that's wonderful. So So I hope everyone takes the
opportunity. We are intending to start contributing again, so you'll be getting some more episodes of Gold Pill Astrology coming up soon. And
great.
Thank you for having me on. And it's been my great pleasure sharing with you, Jarrett. And by the way, in any future shows, I can do shows in the future. I mean, it's part of our Gold Pill series. If other people on your team want to have the same the same quick sharing of the archetypal material, I'd be happy to do it.
That's wonderful, and that's a great idea, and a great way for you to continue to share your gifts is by offering that. So I will absolutely share that, and hopefully we'll see you again, on another reading, and we'll see you on Unite all over.
Fantastic.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All
All right. Take care, everyone. Bye.